Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's not quite as always because we are in Texas, which is, an occasional thing. And we also have a sponsor, which is also something that happens sometimes, but not always.
Yeah, sometimes, but not always. Thankful to have the sponsor here. That is GratefulGriddleOH.com. Buckeye fans, Grateful Griddle is here to take your events to the next level. Whether it's a wedding, a corporate event, or a birthday party, their Columbus food truck catering services up, mouth-watering smash burgers, customizable menus, and unbeatable service. Head to GratefulGriddleOH.com and let them handle the flavor while you enjoy the fun. So thank you to them, and we certainly encourage you all to check them out, GratefulGriddleOH.com. Tom.
Yes, it is a Grateful Dead themed food truck, but it's also an Ohio State themed food truck. So there is, Tony, scarlet, but also a touch of gray.
Apologies to our newest sponsor for that. But I did hear my two favorite words, smash burger.
Yes,
so
yes.
That's very good. So yeah, we are here at the Media Hotel, Tom. It is 30-ish something degrees, like 36 degrees, as you would expect in Dallas, as we await the impending 1 to 4 inches of snow and ice doom that is set to fall upon us. But before that, we thought we'd go ahead and get some listener questions in and just really explore the room, because boy, I put out a request and there's all kinds here.
There are a lot of questions. The first one is from @OHBuck9. Did the changes in defensive line philosophy and the departure of
Mitchell
Melton, yes, mean Larry Johnson is leaving, or could the obvious improvement defensively convince Larry Johnson the changes are good and Mitchell Melton is just leaving for other reasons?
We kind of threw that speculation out there, like, why is Mitchell Melton choosing now, not now to leave, but he is sticking with the team, but there is an opportunity for playing time next year, so why would he choose to leave? And maybe it's because Larry Johnson won't be here next year. But we have that speculation every year, so at some point he's not going to be here, Tom. But it's only speculation right now, so I have not heard anything about Larry's future or Mitchell Melton's reasons for hitting the portal, so I can't give you anything there.
Well, and this is normally a time of year where we are hearing some scuttlebutt one way or another. So this may be a time when, given what's on deck, the last time we were down here was a year ago, and it was a game with a lot less on the line, certainly. With everything moving forward, I would bet a lot of the conversations that may have typically happened at this point of the year have not happened yet. Yeah. So I don't know that everyone is exactly on the same page. I do wonder if, you sort of got away from the traditional Larry Johnson defensive line 4 down kind of look and mixed it up a little bit more, which then you might make you think, well, boy, maybe they're not on the same page anymore. But with as good as things have looked since they have gotten away from the traditional Larry Johnson 4 down, I wonder if that might be Larry Johnson, something that makes Larry Johnson look and kind of go, well, this seems like it's working, so maybe everyone does get back on the same page just based, if this wasn't working, then I think you might have a lot more kind of,
right,
as opposed to now when if it's working, and it very clearly is working, you're getting more productivity, you're getting better results, you're more productivity in terms of sacks and tackles for loss, but also in terms of just overall defensive performance. They locked down Oregon. 8 sacks against Oregon after 0 sacks against Oregon the first time. It's, those are not numbers you can really argue with. So you do wonder if that might sort of help get everyone back together on the same page, whatever degree of a schism there was before.
Well, and I'll throw some more baseless speculation out there. A guy who is number 3, 4, 5 at Ohio State can make more money somewhere else as a 1 or a 2. And I'm not saying that's what this is, but that's the world that we live in now. And so a guy 3, 4, 5 is not making much at Ohio State, can make much more somewhere else. So that's always something that you have to consider as well. Also, I thought it was interesting with all of this Damon Wilson speculation, the Georgia outside linebacker, edge rusher. I was told he's like basically a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not a defensive end. He's a 3-4 outside linebacker. And if Ohio State is this invested in him, what does that mean for what they're going to be running next year? More odd fronts and things like that.
Yeah, and the other piece of the Mitchell Belton thing is not just the money. It also, if you're number 3, 4, 5 at Ohio State, you're getting a lot fewer snaps, and you're getting used much more situationally than you would if you were the number 1 or number 2 guy at. This is just me throwing out a name because he's from Maryland. So if you are the number 1 guy at Maryland, you're probably playing 40, 45 snaps a game. At Ohio State, you're playing 10, maybe 15 snaps a game, and you're playing real situationally. If you are trying to put together some good NFL film for your final season in college, well, you want to be able to show you can do, and you think you can do more than just the one thing you're being asked to do at Ohio State. That might be a very, very logical explanation for why he might.
While it's surprising, there is a lot of logic to it.
Sure, yeah.
For any of the reasons that we just threw out there.
For as surprising as any transfer is, for someone who is not a major number 1 star at a top 3 program in the nation kind of thing. It's really virtually anyone else you kind of go, yeah, I mean, David Wilson had a good true freshman season at Georgia, which was the benchmark for these programs very recently, and now it's like, well, they had a couple seasons where they didn't make the playoff, or they made the playoff, or they didn't make the playoff, and then this year they made it and lost in the first game. And looking forward, what's the future? Georgia doesn't look quite as top 2 in the sport, almost guaranteed every year, as it did 24 months or so ago. So, and again, all of this is subject to change, but how different does the picture at Oregon look than it did a week and a half ago? I mean, there's a lot of change and fluctuation in the sport. Michigan was the national champion this time last year. They were set to play Washington in the national championship game. Washington went 6-6. Michigan went 7-5. And it's stuff changes real fast in this sport. So that might also be a reminder that, hey, there's not a guarantee that Ohio State's back in the semifinal next year either. So you might want to enjoy the fact that they're here and not just spend the entire month being angry and miserable about whatever isn't working at any given moment.
Stuff does change, but then we're still looking at a Final Four of Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Texas. Four blue bloods, but who have gone a roundabout way of getting here over the years, because of course Penn State's never been here, and Texas has been up and down, and Notre Dame is, as we know, has not won a big game in a while since just their most recent playoff game. It was a long time coming for them.
Yeah, they went 30 years between major bowl wins. Texas, this is the second time Texas has been in the playoff, and they didn't last long last year against Washington, and first time for Penn State. So, the club is a little bigger than it used to be, but
they're letting anybody in there.
There were people who were right on the other side of the velvet rope before who are now in the club, but it is still
in the club.
Anyway, so let's go to the next one from @Freddy2Chains. I believe starting fast is paramount for the Buckeyes. How will a slower start impact the game plan?
That will be interesting because they haven't had to deal with that yet. They've just gone out and it's 14-0 before you know it. And so what happens if it's 7-0 after one quarter Texas? And you're having to deal with that where it's not as easy as it has been. But you're not preparing for it to be easy. Yeah, sure, you want a fast start, and we're preparing for a fast start. We're always preparing for a fast start. That's what we want. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, and so you have to deal with what's going on. And as Ryan Day always says, at the half you're either winning, you're losing, or you're tied. And it's very simple, but that's what they go with. And so then you deal with the situation at hand. But I think they're built to. They don't need to start fast, but when they do, it's just an overwhelming thing. They are a third quarter team as well, as we've seen all year long.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Texas took an early lead in this game. And Texas has been a fairly fast starting team all season long. In the 3 games we've watched them play against Georgia in the SEC championship game, they were up 6-0, and could have been more. They had some red zone struggles. Against Clemson, they jumped out to 24-7 at half. And then against Arizona State, you scored 2 touchdowns in the span of less than a minute in the first quarter, and they're up 14-3 after one. So this would not be – you should not just be assuming as an Ohio State fan that, hey, well, they were up 21-0 and they were up 14-0, so they should, let's average it and say, well, they'll be up 17.5-0 against Texas after the first. No, probably not. If they are, that's great news for the Buckeyes, obviously, but if they're not, I think that it takes away some of the advantages they've had in the previous couple games where immediately the other team loses the ability to run the ball because they're so far behind. Immediately, Ohio State has the option of doing whatever it wants to because it doesn't necessarily matter as much. If Ohio State's down 14-0, then you have all the same concerns about pass pro in obvious passing situations that you do, that Oregon had in the same obvious passing situations in the Rose Bowl. We have seen Texas that if that defense knows you're in a passing situation, if it's 3rd and long, if you're down by a bunch and they know you've got to throw the ball, you are not in for a real good time. That is a very, very good pass rushing defensive front. They could get there. They are very aggressive. Phil Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator, very aggressive, bringing pressure off the edge. Colin Simmons, the true freshman, number 11, the linebacker, he comes flying off that edge, creates mismatches. You've got to be able to stay in a spot where you can both run and pass, because you can keep them off balance in that case. If Texas is ahead, that's where you're probably going to see the single biggest concern for Ohio State is pass pro on offense. And then, for Texas has not been able to run the ball real consistently. And if they're not able to run the ball a whole lot early and you can get Texas behind, then they get real predictable in terms of you've got to throw the ball more. And then Ohio State has the benefit of being able to be a little more aggressive in your pass rush and sort of knowing what's coming.
Well, and even if Ohio State does get down early, as Texas's 2 playoff opponents have done, they've still been able to come back. And Clemson to get back within a touchdown. Arizona State, did they eventually grab a lead, or they tied it at least? Obviously, that went into double overtime. So Texas has allowed their opponents to come back. So even if Ohio State doesn't start quickly, and it's not like Texas has needed to be one-dimensional in order to not be able to run the ball. The score has been tied, and they still can't run the ball against Arizona State, in particularly. And of course, Georgia, they were not able to run the ball either time they played the Bulldogs. So, I think yes, you would like to get out to a quick start. Tom, I still don't think this changes anybody's game plan in terms of the coin toss, like defer and try to win the middle eight, get the ball out of the third quarter. Yes, getting the ball first has helped Ohio State. Maybe just be happy if you lose the toss, and then you can start quickly on offense. But always defer.
Yeah, both coaches are very, very likely to defer because both coaches are pretty big on the middle eight piece of things. And for Texas, I think there'd be a more likely scenario where Texas would defer to try and keep Ohio State, or Texas would take the ball to try and keep Ohio State from jumping out to a big lead, as we've seen. Because Ohio State, Brian Day is going to look at his defense and go, if you can go 75 yards, kick the ball out of the back of the end zone, if you can go 75 yards against this defense and get a 7-0 lead, God bless. I think it's very unlikely Ryan Day will choose to take the ball first. I could see an argument for Steve Sarkisian choosing to do that. I don't think he's going to. I fully expect Texas to take if they win, defer as they have the last couple games, and try and win that middle eight as we've seen, because that was something in which game was it? Someone had a big middle eight in one of these 3 games, and
Ohio State has not really had a great middle eight at this point because
you know what I was thinking?
Oregon
I was thinking
had
the Rose Bowl. Yeah. Oregon had a big middle eight against Ohio State. So you've seen what that game was 34-0, and then all of a sudden it was 34-15, and Oregon got a stop, and everyone's kind of puckered up a little bit. It was just 34-0 10 minutes of game clock ago, and now everyone's a little bit nervous, and then Ohio State got one stop and scored, and it was back to being over again. So, but that is the power of the middle eight is. If you can score back to back, that can really swing the game. Next up, from at SPathfinder 1, there's one extra 1 in there. Do you think Jim Knowles will turn Cody Simon loose again to create the same type of pressure on Ewers as they did with Dylan Gabriel? I think so. I mean, frankly, I think you're more likely to see it in this case because Texas does not have quite the consistency in the running game that Oregon did throughout the season. They didn't against Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, but throughout the course of the year, you saw Jordan James just boom, 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 boom. Or Texas's run game has been so up and down the last few weeks that that's not as much of a concern. And you also don't have quite the elusiveness with Quinn Ewers as you did with Dylan Gabriel. Gabriel was so good at getting out of the pocket, extending the plays, picking up 15, 20 yards. He had a 24-yard touchdown run against the Buckeyes in Eugene earlier in the year. Ewers, you've seen him run, and he can pick up yardage, and it certainly seems like the ankle's feeling better, where that's not limiting him anymore. But he's not going to run for 75 yards the way Dylan Gabriel might. You see him pick up like a good. He's like a Drew Aller type, where it's like, oh look, picked up 10 yards. Found a gap, picked up a first down. He had a 5-yard touchdown run in the Peach Bowl. But that's kind of more what you're talking about. So I think the downside of being a little more aggressive with Ewers is not quite as big as the potential downside for Dylan Gabriel was.
Yeah, I think the downside is you've removed a linebacker from run defense, but overall, we've seen Ewers basically give up on a play when there's a blitz coming. He's like, well, I'm dead, blow the whistle, that sort of thing. And when he gets pressured, he will just go ahead and live to fight another day, basically. And he won't always throw it away either. He'll just go down with the ship there. So I do think they will attack him and get him thinking. And if they do that with 4 or 5 or sim pressures or just different guys coming and maybe 4, and Cody Simon is one of those 4. We'll see Lathan Ransom probably as one of those 4 at times as well. So I think you do attack him, and then if he can beat you, again, credit to them. But you don't want to just sit back and say, okay, we're going to play base and we're just going to make things easy, because that's not what they've been doing, and they've been making things hard, and it's been working. So don't change anything that you've been doing. Alter your game plan for Texas, but don't change who you are.
Right. Yeah. They have gotten where they are right now by being aggressive, and you got to kind of trust the guys behind you. And when you've got safeties like Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs, you can trust yourself to be a little more aggressive. I mean, you've got your Jordan Hancocks and your Denzel Burks and your Davis and Igbenosons, who I think they're feeling better about all 3 of those guys than they were at various points during the course of the year. So, I think you're going to turn people loose and play fast and play aggressive. And if Texas shows they can take advantage of that, then sure, then you can adjust. But I don't think there's any reason to get away from what's working right now until you see that it's not working. Next one from @DavidHooser1. Which player from offense and defense will need to be the X factor for the Buckeyes to win? When I came downstairs this morning, they had ESPN on in the media room, and Stephen A. Smith was boldly proclaiming that Jeremiah Smith would be the X factor. And it's like, I don't feel like that's the X factor. I feel like that's like, it doesn't the X factor, isn't that sort of a little bit of a maybe a little bit below the, not the extremely obvious answer. So I think we should set aside, Jeremiah Smith and Will Howard and Jack Sawyer and Caleb Downs. You need to set those guys aside for this conversation.
Oh, you took my first 4 answers.
Well, yeah. I think I took everyone's first 4 answers. How about Sonny Styles on defense?
That's
where Gunnar Helm.
That's who I had.
Okay, good. Well,
for exactly the reason you're talking about right now.
Despite the fact that that's true, I'm going to still continue to feel good about my answer and say that it's Matthew Golden is the number 1 target for Quinn Ewers, number 2 jersey, number 1 target. So, you could very easily take a Denzel Burke or whoever's going to be matched up against him and say, that's the guy. Because it feels like if they're not able to run the ball, then they're going to have to throw, and that's the first target. If you take him away, well, then you can't run, and you can't get your number 1 target, and then you're really playing left-handed. But I think taking Gunnar Helm away, or how well they can contain Gunnar Helm, not number 85, the tight end for Texas, who's really kind of the number 2 target for Quinn Ewers. How does Sonny Styles hold up in coverage against him? Because we saw Oregon have a little bit of success with Terrence Ferguson, but not really until the game was functionally over. Yeah. If you get to the point where Terrence Ferguson, I think, had 1 catch in the first half, if you get to halftime and Gunnar Helm has 1 catch, I think you're feeling pretty good about life if you're Ohio State.
Yeah, and obviously Sonny's also going to be involved in stopping that run, stopping the outside zone. He can cover a lot of ground, so he can get there. So I do think he's a good one for defense. offense, I'm going between two guys, and it's Josh Fryer and it's Carson Hinsman. Fryer when he's dealing with Colin Simmons or whoever else, because they've got some good pass rushers all over the place. So if he can hold up, I assume Donovan Jackson will be fine. If Josh Fryer holds up and limits this pass rush, I think that's going to be a huge thing for Ohio State. And then Carson Hinsman, I don't know that they're going to need a silent count, but this is going to be a road environment, and so just being able to handle that. Like I said, I don't think it's going to need to be a silent count, but still, you've got an experienced center now who can handle a difficult Texas front. So I think those two guys, if they play as good as they have all year, or if they play a good game, then I feel really, really good about Ohio State's chances of moving the ball, aside from all of the other beyond X factors that we've talked about. So those two guys hold up. I think Travion Henderson, not just in the running game, but in the passing game, I think he can do some things there. So I think get some explosive plays out of him. And he's really, really kicking it in. And they have an opportunity, both he and Quinshon Judkins right now, to hit 1,000 yards on the season, which was one of my preseason predictions. I didn't know that it would take 15 games at this point now to get there, but they 75 and 74 yards away respectively. So and of course Emeka Egbuka is still he's about 150 yards and 8 catches away from OSU's all-time leading receiver and yardage guy. So some things to watch there.
Yeah, I like the Josh Fryer pick in particular. The Hinsman thing makes a lot of sense, but the Josh Fryer piece, we have seen Texas get a lot of pressure off that right tackle over against Arizona State. There were several times that they had Colin Simmons or someone coming off the edge, or just plain out beating that right tackle outside and creating immediate havoc. And sometimes that's a sack, and sometimes that's just getting behind the quarterback and pushing him up in the pocket where then he gets sacked. That's if the fact that Ohio State has had a lot of stuff that worked real well the first few weeks. The fact that Will Howard has not been under a ton of pressure, and the fact that there's been 1 sack, 2 sacks in each of the last couple games. If there's 2 sacks for Texas, that's probably fine for Ohio State. That probably is a decent, that's a decent barometer for you probably have enough time to get the ball downfield. Because I think once the ball's out of Will Howard's hands, as soon as the ball's out, that's a big advantage for Ohio State.
Yeah.
Texas's defensive front is the best part of Texas's defense, and as soon as the ball's over their heads, that's good news for Ohio State.
Yeah, and then they'll play a lot of zone, so it's also important for Will Howard to be accurate where he's throwing the ball. I don't expect a ton of deep shots in this game because they will play zone. They'll also try to keep a guy back, so that's why we always see these safeties come crashing down, because they stay back, and then they are heavy hitters in the run game because they're coming from a mile away, so they've built up some speed when they get there. But I don't know how many deep shots there will be in this game, but I agree, that's a great point. As soon as the ball is away, that's an Ohio State advantage. And if Texas can keep that from happening, boy howdy, but once that ball gets away, and the thing is, you don't need to go downfield to Jeremiah Smith for him to pick up 40 yards. We've seen you can throw to him behind the line of scrimmage, and it will be a 45-yard touchdown.
Yeah, you just need to get the ball out to your playmakers and let them do their thing. Speaking of the Texas safeties, Makuba and Taft, the 2 safeties for Texas, I saw something, it might have been a PFF, but it was the top graded units among the 4 remaining playoff teams. And most of them you kind of went, yeah, okay, I can see that, yeah, sure. Wide receivers, Ohio State, no kidding. Safeties was Texas, and I went, I mean, we've only watched 3 games, and they've been very good. There were times when you didn't notice them as much. The bar to me to be a better safety tandem than Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs is mighty high, and I don't know that I've seen that, but we've only watched the 3 games, so maybe there's other stuff, and also the teams that we've watched them play have not been throw it deep, throw it a lot kind of teams. It's been a lot more there's been a lot more run, a lot more balance from a lot of the games that we've watched. So maybe I'm kind of grading them incomplete right now, and we'll see how they hold up on Friday night.
I don't know who we could have watched on their schedule to get an idea of what they can do against an elite passing attack, because there are none. You're talking Colorado State, Michigan, Texas San Antonio, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Georgia, Vandy, Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Georgia, Clemson, Arizona State. I believe stats-wise, in terms of yards per attempt, it's like Arkansas and Florida are the two best teams they've played, and that's not going to tell you anything.
Florida had their third quarterback when they were playing.
So you're not going to learn anything until you'll learn more this week than anything you've seen all season in terms of the safety passing defense.
All right, and last one for this one is at Big and Chunky 50. How much will fatigue matter in this game? Texas played one more game than OSU, the SEC championship game, which went to overtime, as well as two physical competitive CFP games compared to Ohio State, who's been able to coast in the second half of their two games.
I do think getting 10 days between games is a huge thing for Texas and for Ohio State, but Texas has played two overtime games in this in the number of times that Ohio State has actually been playing. So I think it's an advantage for Ohio State, but I don't know how much of a disadvantage it is for Texas because you do have extra time off. But I think with the lack of four-quarter games for Ohio State means they should be fresh. They should be much fresher. But it's still just, what are you doing against Texas? What are they doing against each other in this game? Because, you can be fresh all you want, but if you're getting beaten up front, you're not going to feel like it.
Right, yeah, and you can also, if Texas is able to, drag, move the ball up and down the field, Arizona State, the reason Texas plays so many plays against Arizona State was not that it went to double overtime. That was certainly part of it, but it was that they faced 97 plays because they couldn't get off the field against Arizona State. So, but then that also wore down Cam Scadabo, who on the broadcast they kept talking about the fact that, he hasn't had to play a four-quarter game since mid-November, so he's not used to it. So you could certainly talk yourself into the fact that, that might be a disadvantage for Ohio State if you were so inclined. But it's definitely, you would rather be the team that's a little more rested, that isn't just banged up. Think about what a mess the Ohio State offensive line has been at various times this year. They're all relatively healthy coming into this game. Texas, everyone's at least a little bit dinged up. Their left tackle has missed a game. He missed the SEC championship game. Kelvin Banks got banged up, had to leave the Arizona State game at one point. The right tackle missed the last two games. Last game and a half, he went out with a knee injury about halftime of the Clemson game. He's supposed to be back, but you're not 100% there. So now both your tackles aren't 100%.
Jake Majors, their center, missed a game.
Right. Yeah. So and he was back for the last one, so he should be close-ish to 100%. But there's a lot of guys who are not going to be 100%. Quinn Ewers hasn't been 100% basically all season. Right. It feels like, between the abdominal thing and then the ankle injury. There's just no one is 100% right now because this is a point of the season where no one has been here before. This is uncharted territory where Ohio State, you go back to the longest season in Ohio State history, and they went 14-0 in 2002. Okay, they've played 14 games now, and they could have two more. And so, Ryan Day and Chip Kelly obviously made a point to limit the number of plays, limit the number of exposures that these guys had over the course of the season, and they're certainly making a point to rotate guys more now. Texas has been rotating their guys real deep on the defensive line especially. So coaches are trying to adapt to it, but this is all kind of unprecedented territory for both teams.
Yeah, and I do think there's an argument you could make that the last time Ohio State was in a close game, they lost. Mm-hmm. So what happens if they are in that same sort of situation in this one? Does the doubt start to creep in? Although I would say the doubt from the Michigan game has more to do with Michigan than the situation here, because they've won close games. The Penn State game, they were in that close game against Oregon, and certainly did enough to have an opportunity to win that game. So those situations I don't think have hindered them. They've been able to operate well. But last time they were in a close game, they lost. So this is going to be something that Texas tries to take advantage of. But I do think I'm not going to give out my score prediction just yet. We've got time for that. We will eventually get to those. Get to that when we still have a bold prediction show. Yeah, I know, right?
I'm excited too.
But we got some more listener questions shows as well coming up, and so want to thank you all for tuning in. Hit that thumbs up before you go if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, hit the bell to be notified. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. and also find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. Sign up, say hello to us there on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. We'd love to see you there. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.